My son just went through the college application process. And the thing that they were most interested in was not the IQ, the EQ, it was the CQ. And I think that's what organizations are finally starting to understand. If you look at a lot of our academic clients like NYU and others, or our corporate clients like Caterpillar, Pfizer, and Roche, and Credit Suisse, and all the, Meta, Google, they're looking at the importance of CQ and how that plays into leadership. And I think a lot of people think that it's a soft skill. It's not. It's directly tied to the bottom line. Whether the beginning of my career was in mergers and acquisitions. And so how do you negotiate with the Chinese? How do you negotiate with the Japanese, the Brazilians, the Italians, as we talked earlier? Mm-hmm. How is that different? And it literally can translate into billions of dollars in savings in terms of acquisition costs. So I think when you think about leadership and team cohesion and the way you drive a business, it's pretty incredible. So that's why I wrote the book. It's also about, when I think about inclusion, I think about creating cultures of inclusion around the world. And I know that diverse doesn't have a great sort of definition right now, right? And so whether I'm working with a corporate customer in Asia or in Europe or in the US, it's about creating those cultures of inclusion, but also how do you drive revenue and how do you tie that back to ESG and the social part of ESG?
Right. Because, when I think about cultural intelligence, and I'm just going to bring it forth because for some people, this might be a very new word. We've heard emotional intelligence, we've heard about social intelligence. And, when we think of those words, it is related to the soft skills. Mm-hmm. So when we think of cultural intelligence, and I know in your book, you also refer to cross-cultural management, which sometimes I think, when people talk about diversity, I almost like that terminology better because it really explains a lot more. But diversity, I know, also touches on many other areas that are not maybe addressed in cross-cultural management. But can you tell everybody a little bit more about what CQ is and cultural intelligence and why it is so important? And I know you've touched on a little bit of that already.
So I think that CQ, simply put, is the ability to communicate across cultures and boundaries, right? It's the ability to communicate across cultures and boundaries. It's the ability to implement certain cultural competencies that are going to improve the way you lead, the way you manage, the way you show up in a business world. I work with a lot of global leaders from Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 10 companies, mm-hmm. CEOs, executives who really need to understand how do I communicate differently with the Japanese versus the Germans versus the Brazilians versus the Chinese, right? How do I do that? And how does that show up?
One of the things that you talked about in the book, and what I really love about your book, as I had mentioned, is the case study approach, the storytelling of, where some things have gone wrong because people misunderstood, or, wondering why someone's not speaking up in a meeting, and I'm really understanding what some of the barriers could be to people understanding that if they stay in a place of curiosity and wanting to learn about maybe why that person didn't speak up versus go into, well, shouldn't you be speaking up at a meeting? You're at this level and you should have some input, right?
So one of the things that I notice a lot is with leaders, and this is at the CEO level, we talk about dialing down dominance, dialing up engagement, and inclusion, the balance of the three. Right? So how do those look, right? I always ask leaders, when you walk away from a meeting, and this is even the Gates Foundation, when you walk away from a meeting, did you do those three things? And they will say, well, some people are extroverts, some people are introverts, right? Right? Mm-hmm. And so did you, is it a result of being an extrovert or an introvert, or is it a result of being a good leader? And so what I would say is, if you have a Japanese or a Chinese or an Asian person in the meeting, and you're thinking about sort of their contribution, how are they contributing to the meeting? And I'm working with a CEO right now of a Fortune 50 company, and he will say to me, well, naturally, some people are introverts and extroverts. That's not true. There are cultural differences, to your point, Deborah.
Yeah.
Are people like the Japanese and the Chinese are more hierarchical than the US Americans or the Canadians, right? And so that plays into the conversation, that plays into the discussion, that plays into the presentation. I'm working with a head of sales right now from a major Fortune 50 US pharmaceutical company. And he's saying to me, how can I increase sales in Germany and Brazil? And what are the differences between the two? Well, Germans are very low context. They're very direct. They're very to the point. Get down to business. 3 slides, black and white, bullet, bullet, bullet. Go to Brazil, and it's more context, more color, more graphics, more information, right? More color. And if you try to apply the same to both locations, it's not going to work. And so when we talk about cultural intelligence, and people say, oh, it's a soft skill, it's not. It's bottom line revenue, it's profitability, it's brand, it's strategy, it's sales, it's marketing, it's operations, it's team performance, it's team cohesion. It applies to every single thing across the business.
And there's a tactical approach to it. Like from what you said, one of the greatest downfalls of a business is not understanding that relationships had to be built.
So there's something called the trust equation. Credibility, respect. Those are the things that we build through relationships. And a lot of times US Americans don't understand that. They come at it, and Canadians are pretty much the same way in this respect. Mm-hmm. They come at it with a position of, why do I need to spend time building a relationship? Why do I need to spend time building a rapport? Why do I need to spend my time and money, especially as a New Yorker, building that? Okay. It's because that's the way we build trust, credibility, and respect. Those 3 things, which are the way, frankly, business contracts are built, right? If you think about it.
Yeah. And I find it such when you think about it, it just seems like such a huge oversight, in North America to not see that as, when I think of other cultures, and I think, when they have a siesta or they take time just to relax and converse and hang out, that they really get to deepen those relationships.
So let me comment on, I'm coaching right now a senior vice president of legal for a major Fortune 10 company. And the second coaching session, he said to me, I asked my cab driver if he agreed with you. I love it, right? What a great way to lead. I asked my cab driver if he agreed with you that the people in Barcelona are more laid back than the people in Madrid. And I said, well, first of all, why are you asking your cab driver? Why are you asking him these questions? I don't think he's probably a professional. But I said, I'm interested. What did he say? And he said, he disagreed with you because all the lazy people are in Madrid, not in Barcelona. And I said, oh, okay. So you think that people who are high relationship and low time are lazy? Is that what you think? As a New Yorker? He said, yeah, I do. And I said, you're completely wrong. I said, they're high relationship people. They spend more time. I'll give you an example of Canada. So I was coaching an executive, very powerful female executive. When I came to know her, she was with a company called Vertex Pharmaceutical. She had previously been with Bristol Myers Squibb. So I knew from her questionnaire that there had been issues. And I said, what happened? Can you tell me in one sentence what happened to you? when you went to Montreal? And she said, I didn't take the coaching because I grew up in Algeria, speaking fluent French. And I
Mhm.
was in Paris for 10 years. So I thought, what do I need the cultural coaching for? So off she goes to Montreal. And I said, so how was it one of the worst experiences of your life? And she said, because I didn't take the time to build a credit in the bank before I tried to cash it in.
Wow.
And I said, okay, so you didn't take the time to build a relationship. So why not? And she said, I had a lot of objectives, I had a lot of goals, I had a lot of targets to hit. I just didn't think it was that important. And I said, so what was the difference if you had been in Paris? And she said, the difference was Paris is very hierarchical. It's a very hierarchical society. And I didn't realize the Quebecois are not. And so I go in to Montreal, fully assuming that my team is going to engage with me. They're going to embrace what it is that I'm trying to do. And 6 months in, when I needed them to work with me, they worked against me, right? And so I think when we think about the performance management and the cohesion and the way this shows up in leadership, it's insurmountable.